Do you know what I mean? So at that point, then I saw the Dip advertisement come up. And to be honest with you, that had been the goal originally, because what I'd always wanted to do was, and why I got back into it was just because I thought there must have been other people like me who, don't get me wrong, David, I didn't have that sort of, I didn't grow up in a council estate with trainers hanging off a washing line, but my mum and dad split up when I was very, very young. We went to live with my nana. You know, there was a lot of familial resentments, a lot of alcohol use, a lot of violence between the two, you know, and all this sort of stuff. So it wasn't... and then, like I say, my schooling where I went to, it was kind of... We were bracketed and pigeonholed before we got there. There's a certain set of primary schools in Manchester where all the kids that go to are all top sets, and all of us who don't, we're just kind of like lobbed in at the bottom. We're just there to make up the numbers, really. We get all the shit teachers, and you know what I mean, all that sort of stuff comes with it. So my options and my opportunities were never fantastic, you know, never great. And they're not, I mean, my friends that have done well, like that stayed out of crime and trouble, are all guys who work in building construction. There's nothing wrong with that at all, but there's no professionals amongst us, put it that way. Do you know what I mean? Because we don't get access to that sort of type of stuff. We never got access to that education, to that schooling, to that just the additional support that goes along with being more able and talented. But I don't even think it's down to that. I think it's just being rich. You know, being rich. It's very much dependent on your social class.
Yeah. No,
so
absolutely.
yeah, I mean that was the kind of goal at that point, was, or originally, was just thinking there must be other lads who've gone through what I've gone through, who want to get out and want to make a change, want to get out of crime and want to get themselves straight and clean. And like I say, because at that point I didn't even class it as recovery. It was just, for me, it was more about being straight. That was the harder part. I felt for me was not to abstain. It was easy to abstain. It was actually being straight and doing what we call it, being a straight member of society. And I had no clue what a straight member did. Do you know what I mean? How do you approach this stuff, and how do you do? And how do you get from being here to being there? You know, and it was just,
yeah. So you then went into become a dip worker then, yeah?
Yeah.
And how long were you a dip worker for?
8 years. Yeah, worked on a contract. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. I look at it now and think, why the fuck? But again, it was something that I loved, because I just felt I could affect change on an individual sort of level. And and it was just, I think when I first came into it as well, it was very different. We had a fantastic commissioner. We had a lady called Katie Playle, a very, very good friend of Wolves, and was linked in with the Recovery Academy stuff from the start. And she was sort of superb. And again, I think the original ethos behind DIP was spot on. Do you know what I mean? This idea that was what it was all about, was getting people out of crime and into treatment. And that was me in a nutshell. That was kind of, like I said, why I'd sort of first come into it. So, but yeah, you could just, I mean, even up until the end, you know, I mean, I had a very messy exit. I was a whistleblower and all that sort of stuff that comes with it. But even up until the end, I mean, I really did the actual work with the clients, or service users, I loved. But just that, the whole treatment industry stuff doesn't work. But I was just really lucky. I think as well, because I was involved in, I don't even know why, but I think people just realised that I knew what I was on about and stuff. So I got involved in some really interesting stuff. We used to do we were doing like some research with guys with ADHD. That became like a big thing for me, because all these guys were all this, you know, and you could spot them all a mile off. So and then we were trying to deliver group work for them for probation, and they'd come in and we'd be like having a drug test them as part of a programme. And you'd bring them in and you'd like be sitting there like unpicking the sockets or like drawing on the wall and just being a nightmare basically. And then I actually said to them after the group, I said, right, and they'd all were clean that day, because they obviously for the piss test. So I spoke to the probation officer, who was a mate of mine. I said, listen, I want to try this as a theory. So these guys are all ADHD. They're sat there, I've got them for 2 hours. They're retaining zero information. They're driving me up the wall. It's just a waste of everyone's time and effort. I said, next week, I'm going to tell them all to use or not tell them to use, but I'm going to tell them we're not going to drug test him, and then I want to run the group and see what like. Then, so I spoke to her and then see what I said. I said, listen, lad, we're suspending the drug testing for next week, and I just want to, you know, basically that's it. Nudge, wink, wink. So they all came in and they'd all been using. And they come in, and honestly, David, they sat there for 2 hours and they were focused, they were intent, they were listening, they were contributing, they were retaining information, they were learning skills. It was all this stuff. And coming out and saying to the sort of speaking to probation officer, he'd just been like, fucking hell, like, what a difference. I couldn't and I said, this is it, mate. And so if you look at these guys, they say ADHD, everything that they do, it's just self-medication. We take stimulants to get high. These guys take it just to feel chill, just so they can sit down and watch a film or can read a book or can, you know, finish a jigsaw or just complete something. And so again, it was kind of, yeah, so I was just really lucky. I did some really, really interesting bits of pieces of work that I got involved with, and the sort of, there was like a pathways program for people with borderline personality disorder that really at one point I thought that looked like it was really going to get somewhere. I was going to be really ingrained with probation. That was more working specifically with Winnie, and I really thought that was going to go somewhere, and that was something that would, again, for me, would have been groundbreaking if we could have done it. But the usual thing, it gets into probation. They got some drippy 60-year-old woman to deliver it who didn't really give a shit. She was only, all she ever used to talk about was how many more months it was until she got to retire. And the whole thing just like, it just shriveled on and died on the vine, do you know what I mean? When it was just, so like I say, but from my point of view, I was involved in it from the start, the launch and everything, working with, so, and again, taking a lot of that stuff off on my own and I got involved in, I did some recovery coaching stuff, so they used to do some coaching with the guys, guided relaxation, all this sort of stuff, and just some really interesting bits and things they'd never really had exposure to before, because the vast majority of these guys, particularly on the dip at that point, were just your fully entrenched Class A heroin, crack cocaine users. So all they were ever used to was just someone chucking a methadone script at them and then saying, we'll see you again in sort of 2 months' time. So them actually coming in. I mean, it's a good anecdote for you, but the agency I worked for at the time, we got parachuted in to replace, I think they were called the Lighthouse over at St Helens, and they were a prescribing service over there, and it had just basically collapsed overnight. It's a financial black hole and it fallen over. So the organisation I worked for at the time, which was Arch Initiatives, who have then now gone bump themselves, but we got parachuted in. And I can remember, he's a pal of mine, this Scouse lad, Jimmy, was one of the workers, and he phoned me up that night. He said, you'll never get on this one. I said, go on. He said, I've had this lad come in today, and obviously we're having to assess everybody coming in and just tell them the upshot what's coming in. So he said, this lad's come in. He said, he said, I'm Jimmy, just sit down. He said, just want to go through and have a chat with you, see where things are up to, the support you've been getting since you've been engaging in, and what your plans are, and exiting this, that, and the other. And this bloke turned around to me and said, listen, mate, he said, I've been coming here for 6 years now. I've never had to fucking speak to anybody once. Don't fuck me about. Just give me my script. My taxi's waiting outside. So like, literally, they were keeping the taxi running because they were just coming in, getting a script and walking out again. 6 years they've been accessing that service for, 6 years. And he was just like I said, my pal Jimmy, I mean, he's somebody, again, that's in lived experience. No, just a tremendous, tremendous guy. But him just being like so frustrated on the phone last night. How the fuck does anybody get well within this system when you can be accessing a treatment service for 6 years and nobody's even had a conversation with you about what you want to do or just anything? Not at all in 6 years. It was just, so again, like I sort of say, it's just like you realise that this wasn't just our agency, it was just, it's the whole treatment thing from top to bottom. You know, it was, I mean, I can remember when I first started on the standard response used to be when you go in to see the prescribing consultant, his first question would be, is your methadone holding you, or do you need to go up? And if you ask an addict that, they're never going to say, oh yeah, I'm sound, thanks. They'll always say, yeah, give me more, do you know what I mean? So this is why we were having like people on, like when I first started, 120 to 140 mils of methadone was an average steady dose. You know, like now, the prescribing consultant's got it now. I mean, he's just retired round there. A guy called Jim also, fantastic guy. But it's just taken him now. He's just got to that sort of point when he retired. 40 mils was your standard dose. And the first thing that when he go in and they'd say, oh, my methadone's not holding me, and he'd say, well, you're still using? They'd say, yeah, but well, that's why if you stop using for a few days, your tolerance will come back down and it'll level itself out. But again, I think they'll just like doctors thinking you can medicate people out of addiction.